Hey everyone, it's Colleen, the Preparedness Pro. Got a great episode for you today. There's going to be two preppers on our show today. We've got myself, of course, and we have Sean Gold, the true prepper, as he calls himself. Sean's got a great website and he's got a huge following, over a couple million people. Am I correct, Sean?
Yeah, it's that many visitors over time. So
That's
not exactly
wonderful.
followers, but yeah.
That's wonderful. Well, we're going to go to town here. We're going to talk specifically about how we can get more people in our lives to jump on board with us. But before we jump into any of that, I just want to know, I love hearing about everybody's personal path. I know you've got a military background, but you didn't, just suddenly have a military background. What evolved your path into being a more self-reliant and self-sufficient person?
Yeah. My path started off when I was very young. We had a lot of hurricanes in central North Carolina, and some of them would knock our power out for up to weeks at a time. And my dad was pretty big into preparedness. He was in the Air Force as well. And so he kind of was always ready for something like that, enough to the point where he could go out and help out neighbors. And I always thought that that was very impressive. One of our neighbors' houses flooded. She came and stayed with us. So he always was prepared enough to look out after his family and go beyond that. So that was kind of admirable. And that kind of just stuck in the back of my head. So several years later, when I was looking for a different career path to join the military, that was where I ended up selecting emergency management as my AFSC in the Air Force. And that really kind of, poured gas on the fire. I learned about all sorts of stuff, asymmetrical threats, got my hands on some bad, substances that you can encounter out in the field. Learned about all the CBRN aspects. And also still helped out bases with family preparedness as well. Volunteered with the Boy Scouts, teaching them land navigation. So, I mean, it just kind of snowballed from that point, from kind of seeing what my dad did, appreciating that. And then when I went into the military, that just became like a huge focus for me. After I got out of the military 6 years later, I started my own family and kind of wanted to mirror what my dad did as far as being prepared, and then started the True Prepper as sort of a blog, and it's kind of grown since then into a resource.
Well, it's a wonderful resource. I love how you break things down for people and how thorough you are. I just wrote an article directing everyone to your PDF library because it's so exhaustive, and I think that people will benefit from that. So let's talk about, give me an example or two of when your preparedness has bailed you out of a sticky situation.
Yeah, there's all sorts of little like EDC. I think that's hugely helpful. Just having stuff on you all the time, even if it's not an emergency, it's going to help you out. So EDC has always been helpful for me. Having car kits ready, being able to change a tire, being able to keep the family dry when there's unforeseen rain. It helps you out beyond just emergencies. It can help you out. Preparedness can help you out every day. As far as emergencies, we have hurricanes. We had a big one in Western North Carolina recently. We have power outages pretty frequently still. And so energy and lights and candles and all that stuff. My wife likes to put candles in every room. And so if the power goes out, we just light the candles. So there's lots of ways. Nothing too impactful has happened to us, thankfully. But I mean, things are always around the corner. You never know what's coming, whether it's another power outage, whether it's, keeping the family dry when you're going to a game, a football game or something like that, getting the ponchos out of the car. That you can always find stuff to use your preparedness gear for. So, but yeah, I mean, besides the larger hurricanes, I haven't personally had to deal with anything. And so I've been kind of blessed in that area.
Well, some people would think that being without power for a week or two, that's pretty substantial. And yet you call that, no big thing. So I'd give yourself a little bit more credit because you have had to endure things like that. There's people that haven't gone more than a day without power, let alone a couple of weeks. How was it finding somebody that you could marry that was equally yoked with you in terms of preparedness?
I think it's ever since the website has gotten more successful, that kind of garnered her interest in it. So that's a unique situation to me. I think that there are several challenges to getting people into preparedness, and specifically getting people into calling themselves a prepper.
Hmm.
Um, these challenges, you kind of deal with them different ways. At home, I just said, "Hey, look, we just need to be ready for our kids. We need to be ready for us." And it wasn't that hard of a difficult of a conversation with my wife. A lot of people need to be shown, whether it's reading a book, whether it's seeing things play out real time, like disasters across the world. They need to kind of like have that visual verification. But me and my wife have a level of trust, where I just say we need to do this, and then we do it, and then she's happy afterwards. So I get kind of after action reports. Oh, I'm glad we had this on hand. um, so that's I got lucky there. But it's everybody's different, and everybody comes from a different set of needs, what they need to do. I think one of the toughest things that we've had to prepare for is one of my sons is disabled, and disabilities and prepping, I think is kind of like underserved. Not as many people are talking about that, and I think over 20% of people who are preppers are disabled. So it's something that everybody has a personal journey and how they're going to address those specific needs that kind of go off the general playbook, the general checklist. And so that's where critical thinking, I think, always plays a part.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of people, I hear a lot of times that they're prepping, they're taking opportunities to be more self-sufficient in their life, but their spouse isn't on board. And that's a sad disconnect because, here's this person you want to spend the rest of your life with. You just love them. You share a brain sometimes. And then when there's that disconnect, it makes it a lonely journey. How would you suggest helping to get a spouse on board with being more self-reliant?
Yeah, that's tough. And I don't think it just applies to prepping. I think it applies to many different interests across your entire life together.
That's
Um,
true.
but the prepping, we're lucky because prepping is such a broad umbrella, and there's many prepping adjacent hobbies that you can get into. So if
Hmm.
they're not comfortable going straight into designating a prepping storage area, some emergency food storage, like starting to delve into the actual tasks, you can always get hobbies or go explore things that are adjacent to prepping. And that's also a great way to meet other preppers too. So going on hikes, getting outdoors, that's a good way to kind of wilderness survival kind of entry into it. There's a lot of food preparedness. I'm sure you're familiar with all of that. To go into that angle, there's lots of different angles to come at prepping. So heading down to the shooting range, a lot of people just go down there to get some practice in with their firearms, and you can kind of approach it from a lot of different ways. So you can kind of ask questions and figure out what would make them comfortable. I wouldn't do it directly, but say, "Hey, what would you think about if we went down to the range this weekend together?" or something like that. Maybe it's a hobby that you have that you just want to bring them in and just test out different things. You're going to have some commonality somewhere. So it's just such a broad spectrum, and that'll kind of be your in.
Yeah, I agree with you. So, what are some misconceptions that people have about preparedness as a whole?
I think one of the big misconceptions is that the scope. Everybody kind of thinks that it's preparedness is to prepare for one thing. And that's never the case. And we see it all the time, and not just like for individual preparedness, but when I was in emergency management with the Air Force, it was always write a plan for the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario doesn't always come to fruition. It's usually somewhere in the middle. And then you have a tougher time responding to something that happens in the middle rather than the worst case scenario. So I think it's the same thing as prepping. People think that, and they kind of use that as an excuse. Like if there was a nuclear attack, I don't want to be around. And I kind of really, I mean, everybody in Japan would just throw their hands up at World War II. I mean, they surrendered, but they didn't give up on life. These things, you gotta approach them with a critical eye and make sure that, you're considering all the possibilities, not just the worst case. So, like I said, I've used my ponchos, pulled them out of the car, thrown them on the family when we're going to a football game. There's all sorts of things that can range from minor inconveniences all the way to, serious survival situations that prepping can address.
Yeah, like Hurricane Helena, or Helene. I keep getting the
Yeah,
name mixed up. Helena.
Yeah, people still don't have power out there. I mean, it's
Yeah.
a very resilient group, though. So the Appalachian, Western North Carolina, those people have been scrappy for forever.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
but yeah, I mean, they're still having to deal with the aftermath.
What about strategies that you have found effective, especially in your emergency management background, in creating a community of like-minded individuals and bringing a community together for a cause of enduring a crisis?
Yeah, in emergency management, getting people to pay attention to it was an uphill battle. So like drawing the eyes to kind of what you're doing in the first place was tough because everybody would kind of gloss over it. It's not a very sexy field as far as the military goes. People don't really want to come to your emergency management class and learn about emergencies. They're kind of focused on combat operations. There's lots of cool stuff in the military that you can go on and look at otherwise. But it did teach me that you can still catch people's attention by talking about certain things like that they would find interesting. So one of the things that we would do was have a zombie preparedness plan. And I'm kind of taking it from a different direction from what I just talked about being practical, but it does catch eyes. It does get people's interest. And so, especially young people in the military, they were saying, "Oh, what is this?" And that's your kind of foot in the door to start the conversation of, okay, these are the practical things you need on hand. Before you get to, machetes and whatnot, whatever long-handled shovels. So I think you just tailor it to your audience, really, is what I've learned. And it's okay to be kind of hyperbolic if you're trying to get a message across. So it worked in the military and it kind of works now. I see on my website, if it's something where I'm in my gas mask, one of my several that I have, people are going to click on that more. So people are interested in it more if there's a little bit of a hook to it. So if you're trying to convince people into prepping, you could not just go the practical way. You could also go into hyperbole and exaggeration as well. I mean, plenty of people watch The Walking Dead or many of these TV shows or read novels about prepping that are kind of like 1 Second After, or right now I'm reading Nuclear War. These novels, I know people where these novels have got them into preparedness. So media can do that too.
Wonderful. So let's talk about that balance, though, presenting the seriousness of preparedness without overwhelming or scaring people. I mean, sometimes the scare factors tend to work better. I talk about peaceful preparedness, and sometimes I'm a little too peaceful because people don't take it seriously. But when I push just a little bit of an edge, then their ears perk up and they listen, like you were just discussing. But how do you balance presenting the seriousness of preparedness without overwhelming or scaring people?
It's tricky, and I think it differs for everybody. Whether or not you can talk about it with a hint of humor can kind of help. So that's where the zombie preparedness plan came in
Yeah.
back then when we were making it, because that's one of the situations that's not going to happen. So everybody's kind of like, oh, that's tongue in cheek. Whereas one of the situations that we do have a serious plan for could happen. So we need to pay attention there. So I think it comes down to your personal way of expressing that, how you can describe that to your audience, whether it's your wife or a whole group of young 18-year-old soldiers that are about to go through some like gas mask training in the tear gas chamber. So it's you got to tailor it to your audience and know yourself, like know what you're capable of. If you know that you're going to be pressing your wife too much with these types of questions to get her on board with preparedness, keep saying wife, using myself an example, your
Sure.
spouse, just work within your limits. That you can also go find other people, like I said, and prepping adjacent hobbies to help you out. So if you're not going to find a way to effectively communicate it, then you might just want to sidestep it. So I think it's better to not scare people than it is to kind of be flashy. So you see the opposite of that on a lot of these larger channels out here, like YouTube channels with the fear mongering, the clickbait titles. They can get excessive. I mean, I understand that they work and they get people to look, but it can also be detrimental as a whole, because people that don't click on it just kind of blow it off and say, oh, those people are, wearing tin hats or something like that, because that's what they're doing in the thumbnail.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, it's definitely a delicate balance. And that's why I would suggest to our listeners to go back to the first principle of preparedness that I teach them, which is spiritual preparedness. Where's your compass? Sometimes you need a little extra prayer and contemplation to figure out, okay, how do I talk to this person about preparedness? What's the best way to come at it from this angle? And God knows each and every one of us pretty well, I understand. And so you might get some extra help from on high when you're trying to consider how to create a community, or how to talk to your spouse, or how to talk to your loved ones or your friends about preparedness. Are there specific tools or checklists or systems that you access that you'd suggest for newcomers to take their first steps?
Yeah, I have a basic emergency plan in that PDF list. I also have the article that kind of writes that out. And that's just the simple stuff like emergency contacts, what to do in an evacuation. And the furthest that it stretches is identifying a bug out location. So where you're going to meet up, you're going to have one that's close and one that's a little bit further away. And that one just kind of boils it all down into 3 pages. So it's very concise. But one of the things that I kind of really try to tell people is to look at your local threats and to do a risk analysis. It's something that most people aren't very comfortable with, but it's really easy to do. And there's tons of resources out there online where you can see everything from your flood plan. Like if you live in a house, hopefully you know whether you're in a floodplain and what year floodplain it is, all the way up to nuke maps. You can see like nuclear targets and what the fallout radius of something like that would be. So there's so many resources out there. It just takes a little bit of navigation, knowing which ones to look at and which ones to look at first. So a lot of times you'll see people buy a gas mask before they have a fire extinguisher in their house. So it's all about like prioritizing it correctly, and whether you need a gas mask at all. So it's, there's lots of different steps to it. How deep you want to go changes for everybody. It also changes based on their ability or disability. So it's, it's different for everybody. And I think everybody should take a more critical approach to how they do it themselves.
Well, your gas mask collection, as you might call it, that's as a result of your military background, correct?
A little bit of both. Yeah, I have some modern ones from Mira, Parcel, Avon. But yeah, I started teaching gas masks in the military when they were switching over to the joint service mask, the M50. And so I have one of those and a, a lot of ones previous to that and some Cold War era masks, the Soviet mask, things like that.
So you have an advantage with your military background. Most lay people don't have that kind of experience, and they haven't been exposed to that kind of knowledge. What kind of resources are available to someone who wants to get more involved, who wants to be better educated in even military like examples?
Yeah, well, I think they're on the right path if they're listening to you already. So, I mean, I think preppers are one of the best ways to get into that. Otherwise, you're going to be following tactical accounts and getting tactical information. And those are less worried about practical applications of
Mhm.
a lot of those tools. So, if you're looking at CBRN threats and looking to get more information about CBRN threats, I think preppers are the way to go. And some of the preppers, I haven't seen anybody say anything about the CBRN gear or resources that was inconsistent with what we learned in the military. So it's very straightforward. It's easy to kind of find the threat analysis around it, and it's low probability. So if you skip over it, it's not gonna. There's still plenty to do for prepping. You're not going to run out of things to do, even if you choose not to even touch on the CBRN stuff, which is still a threat, but is a lower probability than a natural disaster in your area.
Well, those in our audience who might not know what you mean when you say CBRN, why don't you explain that so that they can better comprehend that?
Yeah, I'm sorry for using the military acronyms out here. CBRN is chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear. It's an acronym that stands for asymmetrical threats. It also had an E at the end in some instances for high yield explosives when it's used in the military context. But a lot of times you'll see preppers just drop the E. So not worried about high yield explosives. And the previous term to that was NBC. So you'll see that used too, especially on gas mask filters. And that stands for nuclear, biological, chemical. And that's just one arm of emergency management, especially in the military, that addresses things like nuclear attacks, EMPs, REDs and RDDs, which are radiation emitting devices, and dispersal devices like a dirty bomb. All of those are kind of higher probability than biological, which would be weaponized biological, or pandemics. And then chemical, which is very hyper localized. It's very hard to get a chemical. Biological is a lot easier to get everywhere than chemicals.
So, you personally, with your loved ones, your family, what is more practical and plausible for you in your scenarios that you're preparing for?
Practical and plausible as in how? Like what I've done as far as just general preparedness or
Yes,
the
yes.
CBRN? Okay. Um, yeah, in general preparedness, we have kind of a bare bones plan. I work on a lot of skills. I'm lucky to do that. But I am not confident in my wilderness survival skills. So I won't be going on Alone or any of those shows anytime soon. It's just something that I enjoy. And with two young boys, they enjoy it with me. And the most of our plan is going to be a bug in plan. I know a lot of people have the divide of bug in and bug out, but we're prepared to do both, and really hope that it's going to be more of a bug in because bug
Mhm.
out is infinitely more difficult. And so we have the water storage, the food storage for several months, and then a lot of practical tools like energy resources to stay warm. stay protected. Security is a big thing. So we just try to cover it all with a blanket for several months. That's how my family approaches it. And with our disabled kid, we have a few things that we implement there too. So
Wonderful. So what does the future hold for True Prepper? How do you hope it will continue to influence the preparedness movement?
Well, this is kind of the nuts and bolts answer, but with the advent of AI, I'm seeing a lot of competition online.
Mm-hmm.
So blogs have kind of skyrocketed lately. If you've been looking for any sort of prepping information, you're probably seeing a lot of new things pop up online. True Prepper's been around since 2016, and we've seen a lot of other blogs kind of come and go since then. So it's a very, very fast kind of sphere right there. So one thing that I'm hoping that AI, even though I saw an announcement yesterday that they're kind of getting into videos and stuff like that, I'm hoping to start dipping my toe in the water as far as content creation, things like that. So there's a lot of preppers and a lot of people interested in preparedness out there on the shorts, like whether it's TikTok, if that's still going to be around, Instagram, things like that, and also YouTube, as you know.
So let me ask you this question. What's one thing about preppers that drives you batty?
The fear mongering, I think.
Yeah.
That's the number one.
Yeah, that's what makes me roll my eyes too.
Yeah, it feels like a unfair advantage to just scare people into it and to scare people into returning too. So I understand why they do it. It's like we said, sometimes you got to catch people's attention, but it still frustrates me. So, and seeing that kind of like all the most successful people in it are doing that is kind of frustrating to see.
Yeah. It stresses out. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, but we had him on the other day, and he was talking about how the interaction with a human being and having trauma caused because of the result of another human being is very, very toxic for us. And I think that having other preppers, if you will, elevate heart rates and stress people out, I think that does a disservice, and I think it is toxic.
Yeah.
It defeats the purpose. I mean, ultimately, having everybody around us be more self-sufficient and more self-reliant, that's utopia. That's what we would love. I mean, we call it being a prepper, but really it's just acting more like grandma and grandpa, with the exception of maybe some gas masks and some more trips to the range. And yeah, we call it being a prepper. What's one thing that you wish that preppers knew? Whether it's a skill or a mantra, what's one thing that you wish that you could just really get into their heads?
Oh man, that's a tough one. I think one thing that I'd like every prepper to kind of focus more on is uh, I don't know. Do you have something? I'm not used to critiquing preppers very often, so um, something that I'd like them to learn how to do, or a skill, you think?
Sure, something like that. What do you wish that they knew?
I think, and this is something I could be better at too, is, we're talking about it right now, convincing other people. So, and talking to other people openly. There's a lot of gray man preppers, lone wolf preppers. There's some people who are not preppers at all, but say that they're preppers and they just plan on coming with guns and don't have any of the rest of the stuff. Those type of people, like, I think that it's fine if you plan on prepping alone, but being able to talk with other people, and I don't have a problem with the gray man concept either. I think being able to talk to other people and being able to evangelize about prepping is kind of like noble. And that's kind of goes back to what kind of got me into it in the first place. My dad being able to help out the community when he was individually affected as well. So, because what's the purpose? Like you said, you got to find the purpose of not just your life, but prepping. What are you trying to do? And if it's to get armed and go raid other preppers or something like that, that's not a purpose. That's, you just winging it through life. So I think, approaching it with, I don't know, more intention. It sounds kind of cliche, I think, but I think that's what I'd like to see more preppers do. Approach it with kind of a bigger field of view than just, oh, I'm going to save my own butt and not worry about other people. Because like you said, that rising tide raises all of our ships. The more people that are prepared, whether that's through communities, through individuals, I think everybody can benefit from that.
Absolutely. Yeah, for me, I wish that they understood that it was a lifestyle, not a moment in time where, okay, this is our moment. We're going to grab our gun. Yeah. And preppers are famous for lists, and I can understand that. We got to keep certain things compartmentalized and organized. But that it is a lifestyle, and it's a lifestyle that actually enables us to handle life's curveballs, and life will be full of curveballs no matter what. And whether it be raining at a sporting event, that could have been a, really haphazard experience, but, dad saved the day by having ponchos in the car. I mean, that's wonderful. You're building trust with your kids that they know that dad's got their best interests at heart, and that, dad's got a plan. I think that understanding it from a lifestyle standpoint, then it becomes more of a life's journey of how can I be a better person? How can I take care of myself and take care of other people when the need arises? And having that kind of mindset and looking out for others as well as our own benefit, instead of asking who's going to help me, what's in it for me, what's this life got to dish out to me, and instead of taking it for ourselves and taking that responsibility for ourselves. So that's one thing that I wish that preppers better understood.
Yeah, well, there's a whole new generation coming up, and they're very interested in prepping. So, and they're watching us. So people think they're not watching, but they're watching.
Now, why do you say that? Why do you say that there's a whole new generation? What's led you to believe that? Share that with our audience.
Oh, I follow the FEMA. They do their surveys every year, and you can glean a lot of information out of that. The one thing that you can't really tell is who's identifying as a prepper, because that's kind of a label that we kind of self-describe. But you can look at preparedness levels, and they talk about the number of people that wish that they were prepared but are not. They talk about the number of people that are not prepared and don't want to be, which is surprisingly in the teens. And then they talk about the people that have taken at least some measure of step into preparedness. And you have to kind of dissect that from prepping. Just because somebody's went out and bought an emergency food kit, that doesn't make them a prepper, especially if they don't call themselves a prepper. So like you said, it's a lifestyle. But the demographics show that younger people are a higher proportion of interest in preparedness. So as the years keep going, they do one every year, and each year, especially since the pandemic, the proportion of the younger people has grown, whereas all the other demographics have kind of stayed the same. So we didn't see a big boom in preparedness after the pandemic, which was kind of surprising, kind of not. But the shift in the people who are prepping is kind of interesting, because it's every year. It's not just people are getting older, so the demographics are changing. This is a younger band of people. So like people 18 through 30 are more interested in prepping than the 5 years before. So that group, those generations that are coming through, the younger generation is more interested in preparedness, and hopefully we can make that prepping.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully we can teach them the right way rather than through fear mongering. And I mean, they made it
Yeah,
through COVID. If they made it through COVID, they can make it through a whole lot of other things.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's going to be
absolutely.
ingrained in them at that point. So it's
Yeah,
maybe it might be formative to several new preppers down the road, like hurricanes were for me.
yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your insight. We barely scratched the surface of your expertise, but your blog does a wonderful job. It's very endearing. It's very open and approachable. I find that I wouldn't have any difficulty recommending people heading over to truepepper.com. Thank you so much for your time as well and for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Colleen. I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. All right, take care.
All right, bye.